Meanwhile, up this morning on ESPN.com, an explosive news story from Philadelphia. Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler with the reporting, detailing the dysfunction with the Eagles last season, particularly on the offensive side. In the article, a source with direct knowledge described Jalen Hurts' relationship with head coach Nick Sirianni as, quote, fractured and unhealthy last season. At the root of the divide, a disconnect in offensive visions with what a team source described as a lack of full respect for Sirianni's X's and O's chops. That's a lot. Here's Tim McManus. He is standing outside the Eagles facility where the coach will address the media a little bit later this morning. Okay, Tim, the story is extraordinary. I was going through it this morning. For the folks who've not yet had a chance to read it, what are the 2 or 3 most important things fans need to know?
Signs of those disconnect, Greeny, that we detailed throughout the story. One of them being that Jalen Hurts would instruct his playmakers at times to do things that weren't in the game plan. There's a classic example of this late in the season against Seattle. The Eagles down 3, they just need a field goal and an intermediate completion. Instead, Hurts goes deep to A.J. Brown, intercepted, game over. Brown later admitting that they went on their own in that. And a team source said essentially that he wanted to add to what was being taught, like it wasn't quite enough. We know that there was a difference in visions between Hurts and Sirianni when it comes to the offense. And that essentially what would happen was that Hurts would want to go in one direction and Sirianni another. And the worse things got, the tighter their grips became. So Hurts wanted to take more control of the offense, and so did Sirianni. Remember, they're coming off of a Super Bowl campaign. So from Sirianni's point of view, they just went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes, almost won the Super Bowl, and wants to keep things status quo. And meanwhile, Hurts and offensive coordinator Brian Johnson wanted to get more multiple, and they wanted to evolve the offense. So you put all those things together, it creates conflict, and it helps illustrate why they collapsed and went 1-6 down the stretch.
And it was a very ugly finish. And Jalen Hurts is a player who just got paid last offseason an enormous amount of money. So he is about as solidified in Philadelphia as you can be. How about the coach? How would you describe the pressure, Tim, that is on the coach at this point?
I would say it's significant. I mean, here are the facts, Greeny. Number one, both of his coordinators were fired. So whatever safety netting there was, it is now gone. Number two, the expectations in Philadelphia right now are sky high. General Manager Howie Roseman arguably has assembled the best skill position group in team history when you consider Hurts and now Saquon Barkley to go with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. And so all of a sudden the fan base is thinking Super Bowl once again. And talking with people who have a close eye on the coaching carousel, some people already have Philadelphia circled as an opening for next season if the Eagles don't have a very successful season. So no question about it, the pressure is on.
Yeah, feels that way, and especially with such high-profile people like Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel potentially being out there. So, Tim, excellent work, really extraordinary. We'll check in with you later. Again, the piece is up at Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler with the reporting. Andrew Hawkins is up as well, as we're able to get his signal working. And, Hawk, I want to start with you because this, when we were talking through this in our production meeting this morning, it sounded to me like it made sense to you because of the things you saw from their offense down the stretch of last season.
This was a diagnosis that we've seen all the symptoms of a year ago. Even in that stretch during the 23 season, when they were winning, they would have to rely on late game heroics. Their offense seemed dysfunctional throughout the year. It seemed unimaginative. It seemed predictable. And it didn't seem like it had any real process to it. It seemed like they were calling plays as opposed to calling a game, which is much different. And so for someone like Jalen Hurts, me not being in the building, and I can't say who's right and who's wrong, but during that time, we were being extremely hard on Jalen Hurts for the lack of production offensively. And I am sure, like any player in the locker room I've ever been with, they understand that, well, in the media, they're not saying that our play calling needs to change. All they see is a regress for me as a quarterback who was just in the Super Bowl. So there has to be some coming to the table where, yes, I want to consider what you're doing, quarterback, as well as what the coach, the offensive coaches want to do. And that's the dysfunction that this article points to, is that nobody is on the same page. You cannot be successful that way.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. You put it that way. Dan Orlovsky said that over and over again as last season was going on there, that the team was not, that they were just calling plays, that there was not an obvious plan, there was not a rhyme or reason, if you will, to what they were doing. And so if you read this piece, and again, it is recommended reading, it starts to feel like it makes a little sense. As you hear it, as one who has been in these buildings and perhaps seen some of these power struggle kind of dynamics, or however one would describe this, what is your take?
Yeah, I think context here is important. Look, I was around Coach Parcells and Coach Belichick, two of the very best of all time. There were disagreements. I think creative tension is healthy. I think you go behind any closed door in an NFL city during like a week, and you'll hear coaches go at it, and that's, to me, healthy, Grease. So to me, this is a team that was in the Super Bowl a year before. They obviously took a step back, but I think there's something else really fundamental going on, which is I don't think Jalen Hurts for most of the season looked healthy. You know, Hembo likes to point out over the last 3 years, no quarterback ran the ball more than Jalen Hurts. I think Saquon Barkley can help solve these problems, not only running the ball, but also receiving and taking some of these hits off of Jalen Hurts. And I think if he's healthier and they can smooth out some of these rough edges, they're going to be hard to beat this year.
We'll see. Kellen Moore is the new offensive coordinator. The legendary boy wonder, as our friend Rex likes to call him. And I mean, I would defer to the expertise of others, but I feel like his offense is generally one where they throw the ball a lot, right? I mean, so let's see if they lean heavily on the running game with both Hurts and obviously with Saquon Barkley.
So two things, you know, Hawk was talking about how this is just confirmation of what we saw last year. And even last year, when they were 10-0 or 10-1, you know, I was told in that building it was very tense, which is not what you would expect for a team that seems to be cruising, but they were never cruising. And the steep decline, that was a team that seemed to fall off the cliff, and they were just treading water, and nobody could fix it. That was what was disappointing. But what this article makes me think about is actually the Kansas City Chiefs and how they have gone through reload, all sorts of they've lost pieces, they've gotten guys up to speed. But Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes always seem to be on the same page. And it's not for the Eagles, it's not about the NFC East. It's about the Super Bowl. And who are you always going to see? Who do you think you're always going to see? A team like the Chiefs, a team that seems to be like a well-oiled machine. Even when things aren't going right, they figure it out. So when I look at the Eagles and this sort of disconnect, I'm not surprised, but it makes me worry about the future. Because this type of thing, I don't know, it feels like the toothpaste is out of the tube. Unless they have a tremendous season and they're right back in the Super Bowl, there's so many questions, and there have been so many changes on this roster, coaching-wise and roster-wise, that this is a place we have to watch for you.
For sure. And again, Mike T, to address what you said, creative tension can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. But the story suggests that Jalen Hurts, I mean, you have to read it, does not respect the X's and O's chops of the head coach. That's different than creative tension.
Yeah, that's fair, but we're in a results-oriented business. They were in the Super Bowl standing toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid.
With Shane Steichen as their offensive coordinator, right?
That's fair.
Who all of a sudden is doing it. All I'm saying is, you know, this you got to read the story if you really want to get a full understanding of it. All right, I'm up against a break here. We have much more to say. Division, shall we? Huge story up on ESPN.com right now, and it's really good. It's really detailed. It's very interesting. It's done by Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler. Again, it dropped this morning, and it details the dysfunction within the Eagles last season. We kept saying to ourselves, why does this team look so off? If you read this story, you're going to get a sense of why. In the article, one source with direct knowledge described the relationship between Jalen Hurts and the head coach Nick Sirianni as, quote, fractured and unhealthy. At the root of the divide is a disconnect in offensive visions, with one team source describing a lack of full respect for Sirianni's X's and O's chops on the part of Hurts. It details all the differences that they had last year, including a time in the season in Seattle when Hurts changed a play late in the game and it wound up costing them a game. Hurts wants more control of the offense, wants to prove he was worth $250 million with every throw. Fascinating, and you need to read the piece to get the full sense of it. In the meantime, I spoke with one of the writers of the piece, Tim McManus, this morning, asking how significant the pressure is now on Nick Sirianni.
I would say it's significant. I mean, here are the facts, Greeny. Number one, both of his coordinators were fired. So whatever safety netting there was, it is now gone. Number two, The expectations in Philadelphia right now are sky high. General Manager Howie Roseman arguably has assembled the best skill position group in team history when you consider Hurts and now Saquon Barkley to go with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. And so all of a sudden the fan base is thinking Super Bowl once again. And talking with people who have a close eye on the coaching carousel, some people already have Philadelphia circled as an opening for next season if the Eagles don't have a very successful season. So no question about it, the pressure is on.
Now, we had a conversation yesterday that really, if you look in that division outside of Washington where Dan Quinn and the staff are new, I think there's heat on all three of those coaches, in New York, in Dallas, and in this case, in Philadelphia. And I'd like you to make the point for the audience that's joining us here, Hawk, about what you saw from that offense last year. So when you read, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni not on the same page. Jalen saw it one way, wanted to do some things. Sirianni on the other side. The offensive coordinator kind of in the middle. Why did that make sense to you?
Well, I mean, listen, it was an incredible article and it gives a lot of insight. But to be honest, if you watch this offense last year, AI probably could have wrote this article. That makes all the sense in the world. When you see guys and their demeanor on the sideline, what they were saying in the post game, the way that their offense looked inept, even when they were winning games, it would take late game heroics. They were calling plays rather than calling a game. It didn't seem like it had any real system. They actually underutilized those incredible weapons on the outside. They couldn't get the run game going. It was very clear they were not on the same page. And this article just gives the diagnosis of all the symptoms we saw.
And Dan Orlovsky said that so many times as it was happening. He kept saying, they're just calling plays. They're not calling a game. And that may not sound like an obvious statement. You have to kind of sit back and think about what it means, but there is a flow and a rhythm and a sort of big picture strategy to things that get done rather than just, let's throw this out here and see if it works this time. And that, it feels like, is what they were doing. Hawk is saying it and Dan was saying it repeatedly while it was happening.
Yeah, agree. I got to go to the other side of this, which is the year before, they're in the Super Bowl. It's so hard to get there. We talk about the Jets. They haven't been in the playoffs in over a decade.
Why would you bring that up?
Mike.
We're talking about the Eagles. Why would you go
better,
to the
Mike.
what?
Because it's every other segment in here, but it's just context.
It's ironic that there is a picture. Take that one shot again, Cindy. You can see Aaron Rodgers' jersey over your shoulder, and you're taking completely unnecessary shots at the Jets when they're not even the topic
Aaron's
of
gonna remember that. Don't worry, Green.
Go on with your point. So the Eagles are in the Super Bowl 2 years ago.
Context is everything. So look, they had bumps in the road. We know they lost Shane Steichen, get all that. But look, this is a team that still went back to the playoffs. I'd be surprised if they didn't win the division this year. So when you think about developing a head coach for him to make the playoffs in consecutive years, go to the Super Bowl, and let's see what happens this year. I agree. These are massive opportunities in the AFC East. And when you talk about Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, and you look at some of these quarterbacks that could be there between, Jalen Hurts, we'll see obviously what happens with Dak Prescott. The intrigue and the pressure will certainly be there, but I do think Saquon Barkley will make Jalen Hurts healthier, and that will be meaningful.
To your point, and I agree. Look, if they make the playoffs this year, then this whole conversation becomes irrelevant. But the way they collapsed last year, Mike, that was not normal. And again, this article, to Hawk's point, and if you read it, it makes it all feel like it makes a lot more sense. That was a little different than your normal sort of late season slump.
Yeah, no question about it. And that was really on both sides of the ball. That Arizona loss obviously hurt them quite a bit. But again, when you go fast forward to this year, I would be surprised if they didn't get off to a good start given all the weapons they do have.
Agree with you there. We all expect them to be good. But do you remember this offseason we were waiting and waiting for the Eagles, for Nick Sirianni to have that final press conference, and we're like, what is happening here? Like, why is this taking so long? A lot of people were wondering, is this guy out of a job? Because going back to last season, even when they were 10-0 or 10-1, I was told in that building, super tense. And that is not how you can be when you have that record and that type of team. And you had the leaders, you had the playmakers, and theoretically you had a team that went to the Super Bowl, Mike, to your point. The fact that they couldn't figure it out, the fact that was on Nick Sirianni, despite all the coaches, it's fine. Mike, you said earlier, it's what we want to see is tension sometimes between coach and player, quarterback. That shows everybody cares. It's different when Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are jawing on the sidelines, or you don't worry about them. This situation, that whole article just explains everything that we thought something was terribly wrong in that building and nobody could fix it. And the head coach is still there. So what is going to be different this season? That's what we need to see, because the talent, to your point, is there. They should be good.
You just mentioned you think they'll get off to a fast start. So I just looked up their schedule. They open on a Friday night. Remember, the season starts on Thursday. Then the next night, Friday night, September 6th, in Sao Paulo. So in Brazil, Packers, Eagles. So they're playing Jordan Love, you know.
Your Super Bowl, Jordan, your Super Bowl.
And that's a really interesting game. Then they got a long break because they play a Monday night game at home against the Falcons, who I think are going to be pretty good. Then Saints, Bucks, Browns. We'll see the kind of start they get off to. It does feel like a place, Hawk, where if they get off to a fast start, and it's an all new coaching staff on both sides, right? You got the new offensive and defensive coordinators. If they get off to a fast start, then all is well and good. But if they get off to a bad start, do those things from last year creep back in?
Absolutely. Absolutely they do. And I think this article is like terrible timing for this team that does probably begin the season with a great outlook, because people in that locker room, if they feel that friction between your franchise quarterback and your head coach, they will absolutely start to choose sides. And that's where the issue arises, because from Jalen Hurts' perspective, if the offense is bad, it's coming back on me. And from Sirianni's perspective, if the offense is bad, it's coming back on him. So when you use this article, they're both probably hoping that one of it points more towards the other person's direction, and that's what the public narrative is. I've been in locker rooms where the player and coach have been in opposition, and these exact things happen, and eventually you end up washing everyone. So this will affect the team if they don't start hot and they don't stay on the same page, even when things don't look as great as they did in 2022.
The one thing you need in an NFL locker room, you got to respect your coach. And I'm not saying, you got to respect that he has a plan, that he has a vision, because he's going to stand in front of you middle of the week at your team meetings, the night before games. And a lot of times guys are listening to coaches and it's just like, okay, whatever. Like, that's what you want to avoid. And hopefully, to your point, they do get off to a good start, because this team is too talented not to be in Super Bowl contention.
All right, as we continue, you're going to hear from one of the greatest coaches.